Good evening, everyone. I'm going to walk you through a presentation on the election in Ontario that's in June 2018. Ontario's at a crossroads now. Since 2003-2004 period of time, we've been under Liberal rule. Because of that, we've seen balloon deficits. We've seen manufacturing jobs leave the country. We're at a stage now where if we don't have a change in policy, we're going to be seeing more and more difficulties with Ontario being competitive with other jurisdictions in the world. In my agenda, I'll talk overall about manufacturing, some of the key sectors, and then I'll also get into the fiscal management cycle. Ontario's manufacturing sector is still a very big area of the economy, but it's had consistent pressures, whether that's been through hydro rates, whether that's been through regulatory issues. It's been impacted. Those impacts are starting to be impact how business grow in this company, in this province, including how they expand. More and more businesses are looking elsewhere to expand because they just do not feel Ontario's competitive enough for them anymore. Jobs are jobs. You'll hear Kathleen Wynne spin jobs, but the reality is Ontario is shifted to a part-time economy, and that's not good. And we've just seen in the January 2018 numbers that Ontario bled a lot of part-time jobs. Part of that's to do with Kathleen Wynne's staunch support of new labor changes, which hindered small businesses and forced them to make some structural changes. Kathleen Wynne was warned about that she would see jobs cut. But she pushed forward her reforms because, like anything else, you cannot talk to Kathleen Wynne because she thinks she knows everything. Automotive in Ontario used to be a very solid sector. We've lost about 3 to 4 plants now, and that's significant because those were significant middle-class jobs. Class 8 trucks, we don't even manufacture them anymore. The last few truck plants in St. Thomas closed. Used to be a plant in Chatham, it's closed, all under Liberal watch. Steel production, it's down where we were back in 2008. Because we've seen less production in, plus we've also seen some dumping of steel from China, so that impacts it too, but also the competitive nature in the steel industry. The steel industry has mentioned, like other industry, that the carbon tax is an unfair tax. Food processing, they really is a big sector here, but they're also complaining about labor issues, hydro costs, regulatory burdens. Again, these are not things you'll hear from Kathleen Wynne and her party. Mining sector, Ontario has dropped because Kathleen Wynne doesn't see anything value of trying to get product out of the ground. She only focuses on her areas of power, which are Toronto and Ottawa. Anything outside of that, she doesn't care. Ontario debt and deficit. Our debt now is over $300 billion. There is no plan to pay that down. So if you see large scales of debt, what that really means in a nutshell, that means future taxes. And if you're in a province of a business owner, an employee, a worker, or whatever, you're always feared that you're going to be seeing some shape or form of either a combination of tax increases or program spending cuts. Now let's talk about the Kathleen McGuinty era. You hear a lot of rhetoric from Kathleen Wynne and even prior to that with McGuinty about programs. What I want to go through is this particular graph here in government spending. Now, when Mike Harris left in 2004, or basically Ernie Eves, basically our program spending was basically, in terms of focus on expenses, was every dollar we spent in 2004, about 40 cents of that went to healthcare. If I roll forward now to where Kathleen Wynne, she's actually spending about 2 cents less on healthcare as a percentage of the overall government dollars, which she will not tell you is that ratio. She will tell you she spent more on absolute dollars, but if she kept the ratio, which would have been 2%, 2 cents, it would have meant a few more billions of dollars in healthcare, but you won't hear that from Kathleen Wynne. I look at competitiveness, and Ontario's lagging in competitiveness, and that's what this chart. Cap and trade. This is poorly constructed, wasn't required. You're seeing the price at the pump as we speak, where taxpayers are paying at least $110 more a year to fund this cap and trade system. and it doesn't reduce emissions. Key waste, there's been billions wasted by the Liberals. So when you hear the Carolyn Mulroney's talk, the Christine Elliott talk, the Doug Ford's talk about the fiscal management, you can probably pretty well guarantee that the Liberals in Ontario probably waste $1 to $2 billion a year. So through different process changes, there's probably money to be saved, but you will not hear that from Kathleen Wynne. Drummond Report. This came with a lot of fanfare. It was basically supposed to dictate how things done, but very little work was ever done on the Drummond Report, and that's a critical aspect. That no matter what report that the government issues, seldom do they ever look at the findings, including the Auditor General. Moody's has warned Ontario that they've got a problem with spending and debt. Moody's is critical because with any sort of bond rating organization, if they lower rate your bond, that means there's a premium on that. That means the interest rates go up. You will not hear that discussion from Kathleen Wynne either. Education. Education is becoming a big problem here. We're seeing poor scores in math sciences. We're also seeing some issues in terms of rural versus urbanized schools, right? So we're seeing a lot of issues in terms of school closing. Plus the hydro rates have impacted school operating costs like they have for hospitals. But again, you won't hear that from the Liberal government discussing that. This just looks at funding quickly. She's actually, if you look at that ratio I talked to you before about, is she's actually put more money into education, but most of that money went into salaries. You can thank McGuinty for that. This kind of gives you an idea of cuts, because the school boards cannot run deficits, so they have to have a balanced budget. This kind of shows you what I want to talk about, people, is the federal government increased transfers like 5-6% change as part of the health accord. Wynne only gave healthcare half of that, so she kept some of that money for other things. This kind of looks at things. The Liberals created CCACs, they created LINs, which were just another bureaucracy that just bleeds the system. The healthcare premium goes into general revenue, doesn't get the healthcare, and again, you won't hear that discussed. Arbitration is broken in Ontario. The system doesn't work right now, and the problem is it's not based on ability to pay. So if an OPP officer gets a raise, then you can guarantee other municipal forces will have to be faced with those raises as well. The government uses this Job and Prosperity Fund to basically give money out handouts to profitable businesses. I've looked at this fund in great length. I support economic development, but I support economic development in a broad range of policies. That includes reducing taxes, reducing the regulatory burden, looking at ways to get goods and services to market. That's where I support. I don't support handouts. Hydro rates, this is the big issue. Industries complained about it, and we have a lot of seniors and people living in energy poverty. Her fair hydro plant is anything but fair. Basically, all she did was push everything onto the debt, and then after 2019, the rates go up again. You, again, won't hear that from the Liberals. This guy is the new Minister of Energy. He's as and the thing with this guy, he never speaks in truth. He speaks in misinformation. Wynne takes responsibility for FIT, but the orchestrator of FIT was Gerald Butts. And just remember, Gerald Butts is now orchestrating the clean energy across Canada. So if it's bad in Ontario, you wait till you see it's implemented across Canada. This just gives you an idea how far Ontario's fallen in the mining sector. We have tons of mining capabilities like the Ring of Fire, but those projects are either not going or taking slow to develop. Automotive sector I talked about. Now, I really want to focus quickly on this slide here. This kind of shows you some sensitivity. Every government looks at debt to GDP. Okay, the issue is they're trying to grow GDP faster than debt. So nobody looks at the absolute whole dollar amount. So at one point, she was going to bring the debt down to a pre-level of 28% or where it was under Mike Harris. The problem is, in order to do that, she would have to cut program spending or get taxes growing or a combination out of fiscal management. That's not happening. The actual the oversight Commission looked at this and they believe there's a $4 billion deficit that Wynne is hiding. I guess we won't find the truth about that until we get to the election. This kind of just gives you some of the issues I've discussed with the supporters over the years. Wynne now wants to take the private sector that's doing a decent job at home care. She wants to now look at to bring it in-house. Anything Wynne has touched and her government has touched in general, whether it's been Orange or other departments, have been a mess. Wynne had one of her people convicted of the cleaning in the drives. That's something to bear in mind. Oversight and accountability tend to not to go hand in hand with liberal governments, and it's something you need to bear in mind. They have zero respect for taxpayer dollars. This is a key on a high level that we've lost about 75,000 jobs in manufacturing since Wynne took office. Now, the Liberals in general have been a problem. The income in Ontario barely grew over the past decade. Part of that reason is we lost good manufacturing jobs and replaced them with service sector. Again, you will never hear Kathleen Wynne and Charles Sousa talk about that. They'll talk about the high-level numbers because you can't sell the details. I always tell people the devil's in the details. These are just some examples of failed policies. In summary, Ontario, you're at a critical stage. You've got three parties to choose from. You have the NDP led by Andrea Horwath, and if you want to see how bad the NDP is, go look at Alberta and BC, what's happening out there. If you want to look at the Liberals, look at Kathleen's track record for the last 4 years and McGuinty's prior to that. It's deficits and debt, reduced services for healthcare, education system broke, jobs leaving the provinces. If you want that legacy to continue, by all means vote for Kathleen Wynne. If you want to change how we move forward with something, then you need to seriously look at whether or not you need to seriously look at the Ontario Progressive Conservatives, because they're very similar to how Harper ran things. They take respect for the tax dollars, they're focused on the economy, and they take a balanced approach. You will hear Wynne talk about the PC's cutting services, but what you will never hear from Wynne, by forcing or holding spending to inflation or not, you're actually forcing cuts. If you do any sort of Google search on nurses or any sort of cuts to hospital or healthcare, you will see layoffs have happened under Wynne's watch. She's just not done them directly. She's done them behind the surface. So that's something to bear in mind when you're casting your votes. So this kind of gives you an idea of some of the issues that you need to envision when you talk to these people and listen to the debates, even with the party leadership between Carolyn Mulroney, Christine Elliott, and Doug Ford. You need to see what they say on these type of policies, because these are critical policies that are going to drive things. Thank you.